Welcome everyone to the Wisdom Within. And this is an event with the Inner Wisdom community, and we hold this weekly, and we have the beautiful Catherine Anness, who I love talking to about these sorts of subjects. So this week, Catherine, I was thinking that we were going to talk about why people take things personally. And it's in my therapy practice, it's one of the biggest things, one that holds people back. They always ask me about it. And when they describe to me the problems that are going on with other people, they haven't yet seen that they don't need to take it personally. And my belief about this is that we don't need to take it personally if we have an understanding that other people have stuff going on in their mind, this world that they create for themselves. And when you truly, truly, truly see that, you are able to stand back and watch that sort of manifesting, arising, and see it going on without actually sucking it all in and taking it into yourself. So I wonder what you thought about that.
Yeah, hi Marion. It's great to be back here with you. I love our chats, and I posted to you earlier and said I love them because it gives me time to reflect and to focus on an area of life that I may not have necessarily been focusing on, but I always see something deeper either during or after our conversations, and this is no exception. So as you know, I came across an understanding called the 3 principles about 4 years ago, and I coach from a perspective that's largely informed by that understanding of life and how our experience gets created. It isn't only informed by that understanding. That is just one articulation of how the human experience comes into being, and an articulation that has been helpful to me. But one of the things that understanding talks about is the formation of separate realities. And I'm no neuroscientist, but from what I've read and what I understand, neuroscience also is showing us that every single individual, no matter how common our experience is taking in information and interpreting that information and then creating their experience of life.
Yeah.
Now, don't ask me for the science behind that, but we all have heard this. We all sense that there's some truth in this, I think. It's why you and I can go out and watch a movie and have 2 completely different experiences of that movie or any experience outside of ourselves. There's a lens that we view it through, and it gets interpreted through this brain and body through that lens, and then that's my experience of the circumstance. So as I've come to see this more and more clearly, I don't take things personally very often because I see that it isn't personal, that it can't be personal, that the way somebody treats me is based 100% on their lens, the lens that they see me through. Now, if the clearer I see that, the less I take things personally, even when the person intends it personally. Even when someone is saying, something that would generally be thought as very unkind to me. I have a little story about this, if I could tell it just quickly. So a number of years ago, I'm in a wonderful relationship with a person that I respect and love dearly, and have been for 12 years. And we've had a very up and down, rocky relationship in some respects, but we're really on a wonderful journey together. And in the last several years, since we've understood about separate realities, our relationship is much more harmonious and much more authentic. Now that's the key. It isn't harmonious because we're trying to be nice to one another or we're compromising for one another. It's that we now understand that we are not the source of one another's feelings. Now, this isn't to say that we can't do some really unkind things to other people. But if I'm feeling insecure or I'm feeling angry, it's not necessarily, it's not my partner's fault. It's I'm interpreting something and generating this emotional experience. Now that doesn't mean, the clearer I am about this, the less of a doormat I am. Okay. So
Yeah.
he's being himself. He's just being himself. And if I take that personally, we are in trouble. Okay. Now he's being himself. If I think he's the cause of my happiness or my unhappiness, I'm going to be working really hard to try and get him to change.
Yeah.
Now, when I understand that his behavior isn't personal, that he's just being himself. Let's put it that way. I'm being myself, he's being his self. Now, until I take care of the reality that I'm creating and he takes responsibility for his, we're always going to be trying to make the other person into what we want them to be. So, I mean, this could sound more complicated than it is, but I just want to tell a little story about, I went on a journey of self-love a decade ago, and tried to understand what did it mean to love and appreciate myself, because I realized I didn't love and appreciate myself. And I was in a relationship with this man, and when he would criticize me, it hurt. And he was the one person that I wanted to be on my side. Now, he was the one person that I wanted to be on my team. So when he got angry and criticized me, I would be devastated. So fast forward, I'm on a spiritual journey, a self-growth journey, whatever we want to call it. It went from self-improvement to self-love, self-acceptance. At the beginning it was self-improvement, and then it became, it was the journey of self-love and self-acceptance, which was a much harder thing to do than to continue to try and improve myself. But let me tell you what happened. As I continued on this exploration of what it meant to love and accept myself as I was, there was one particular blow up argument that we had where he just sat me down and told me everything that was wrong with me and started to list how I am with money, yada, yada, yada. Let's say the list was, there were 10 major areas where I needed a lot of improvement. There are probably more, but only, let's say, 10 of them came up in this scathing assessment of who I was. But I just want to give you a taste of what happened for me, because I'd really come to love and accept and appreciate the imperfect human being that I am by this time. As I listened to him, I was in a state of wonder, because the arrows weren't going into my heart as they had in the past. And this is just what happened. I had such a I could hear what he was saying. I saw that he felt that way about me. And those assessments were his opinion of me in the moment. I knew that there was a thread of truth in what he was saying, but I knew that that wasn't my identity. That wasn't who I was at my core and in my essence. Those character flaws that he was pointing out, that those were just some of the ways that I had experienced life. Let's say not being great handling money, not doing a great job dealing, where I would have felt a lot of shame. I had come to a deep acceptance of the areas where I was challenged. And I just felt so much compassion for that person that he was describing. And that person he was describing, was me. I no longer felt ashamed. I wasn't taking his opinion personally. I was seeing a bigger picture than the opinion he was giving me. And I also knew that his opinion was based on the lens that he viewed me through. And so that was just a real watershed moment for me, is that I had been on a journey of self-acceptance. And what I came to understand through that, and it doesn't mean that we didn't have an ongoing, we had an ongoing conversation, but the exchange was very different, because I was not in resistance to anything that he was saying. I was in total acceptance of how I show up in the world as an imperfect human being who has areas of growth that she's living into. And my own self-acceptance of that meant that I didn't take his opinion of me personally in that moment when he was admittedly angry. And the fact that I didn't react with defensiveness meant that it happened, and then we went on and continued the conversation and got to a much more loving and supportive exchange. I was so grounded in my sense of being okay with who I show up as in the world, that opinion, that critique, that criticism coming from the outside, I no longer heard it and took it inside. It didn't enter and permeate. There was no arrow to the heart, even though, I mean, let's face it, I didn't enjoy hearing it, but what arose was compassion. So that was the outcome of, you see, I always thought I needed other people to treat me a certain way to be okay. Though there's a lot of management of how people treat me. And when I take things personally, I'm not seeing that other people are treating me as a result of the lens that they're seeing me through. Does that make any sense?
It does, because everything that you're saying is sort of what I talk about with my clients. And the number one thing that I think is really, really important is that you stop taking things personally when you're really connected with who you really are.
Yes.
So number one, you become really authentic. Number two, you are kind to yourself and you accept those imperfections that you have. And I love that, because once you get to that place, it is far easier to allow other people to be who they are.
Absolutely.
And, that's my simplistic way of saying it, really. And I have noticed, I usually say, when you were discussing before about how we see the world, I always give the analogy of if you had three people looking at an aeroplane, and one of them is completely excited that they're going to go on holiday. The second person is very nervous because they don't like flying. They just want to get to the other end. And the third one won't even get on the plane because they're absolutely freaking out. And they are sure that that plane's going to fall out of the sky. It is not the plane that is the issue. It is the thoughts that they are having around that. And so therefore, when somebody is shouting at me or not being very nice, I can see it's not me that is the issue. It is how the lens, as you said, that they are seeing me through, that it is forming that. And if I'm secure in me and being the best version of me that I can be, which isn't perfect, and I'm accepting of that, then everything is fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's what my reaction to other people's criticism actually shows me how much the degree of self-acceptance that I have. I am really okay at this stage in life with being an imperfect human being who has strengths and challenges, strengths and weaknesses, like I really see the beauty and our perfect imperfectness as human beings. So we're showing up here, and for me, this is a process of growth and learning. That's what life is all about. And I have really given up on, I need to be something for someone else, or I'm supposed to be something in particular. Being a human being is a work in progress. My essence, my soul is perfection. There's a wholeness, and there's a beauty in my worldview to who I am spiritually. But as a human being, I'm continually a work in progress. And I really, again, separate realities. Everybody is creating the reality that they live in through their interpretation of their experiences. It doesn't mean there isn't a real world out there that affects you. It does. But the way I interpret that is 100% responsible for my experience of what's currently happening, right?
So I've got two questions in my mind that I'd love you to talk about. So one of them is, if you were in a workplace and had a lot of conflict and people were very difficult around you, how would you deal with that? But the second one is taking things personally, to me, is a form of judgment as well. We fall into this trap of judging people around us who we believe are saying something or doing something to us, or that look or that word that they say. And so taking things personally, we have to look at the fact that we judge people too.
Yeah.
So yeah, so going back to the first one, if somebody's listening and they're having trouble at work and conflict and people don't like them.
Yeah, I love this question because I've certainly experienced it.
Yeah.
And most of us have been
Yeah.
in what we call a toxic workplace, or a workplace that was less than a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
And so I've been there, and I can tell you exactly what I've done. I came to the understanding that the one thing that I could control in any environment, or could be responsible for, was what I was bringing to the dynamic.
Mm.
Now that may not sound very powerful, but it's very powerful actually.
Right.
And so the question for me was, I see other people's behavior. I'm very aware of it. I'm not naive. I'm not pretending it's not happening. But what I'm going to do is take full responsibility for what I bring into that interaction.
Mm.
And what I bring into that interaction is based on my own values. And so no matter how dishonest someone else may or may not be being, I want to take care of bringing integrity. That's what I bring to the interaction. If I want clarity, if I want better communication, then I make sure I'm the one who's stepping up and bringing that to the dynamic that I find myself a part of. Now, you might think that that's not taking enough action when people may be being manipulative, or they may be being dishonest, or they may be being cruel. But what I've found in my own experience is that when I stop focusing on trying to change what other people are doing, but get really, really very clear and very consistent in what I bring to the table, that either moves me out of the situation or it transforms the situation that I'm in. Yeah. And that's been my experience, is that when I come with clarity, it may occur to me that it's time to get out of that situation. I don't waste my time trying to change the dynamic. Let's say I'm working in a really unhealthy environment or an institution where showing up and being clear and honest isn't what is expected of you. Yeah. Well, I'm going to show up and be clear and honest anyway. And guess what? Life is going to move me out of that, or it's going to become clear that I need to move myself out of it. Yeah. And that's a really practical, down to earth way to get grounded in your own experience. And then, and Marion, things happen, but as long as I go back and say, was I honest? Did I act with integrity? Did I bring as much clarity as I could to the situation? I'm totally at peace with the way that unfolds in the larger picture. Even if someone lied about me, let's say someone lied about me and I was terminated. I call that divine redirection. I don't want to get too woo, but I totally trust. If I take care of my peace, that's it. I totally trust the larger unfolding of the bigger picture.
Love that.
And it wasn't until I got very grounded in my own clarity and my own sense of integrity, of living from a place of integrity myself, that I could lose the sense of needing to control anything outside of me. And Marion, it was magic. When I really got grounded in that, there was such a deep sense of everything else that unfolds, no matter what is motivating other people. When I'm grounded in my own integrity and my own clarity, I can absolutely trust the way this life is unfolding. And that's a beautiful place to be in, no matter how much chaos is around you.
That's such a beautiful reminder, Catherine, to walk through life being the best version of yourself. And um, there have been many times in my life where I've lost that. I've known it though, and I've lost that direction, but it is profoundly important, and it
It,
does transform your life.
it really does. I mean, it does, Marion. It's the one thing that is empowering, that I found that's
Yeah.
empowering. I mean, never. There's lots of strategies and techniques and things we can do and win friends and influence people, but what's even more empowering is, and I just want to say about losing our way. Don't we always? Don't we? We lose our way. We regain clarity. We get confused again. We can always trust that we'll fall back into this inner clarity. Our default place or our home base when our to be gentle and kind with yourself. Again, to be loving and compassionate to yourself when you go astray, because we all do. That's the game of life. We all do. And then we can come back and fall into this clarity, and we'll always have an opportunity. Like, I can always go and clean something up. When I find that I've been dishonest or I've done something that doesn't sit right with me, I can always go back and clean that up and say, and it doesn't matter what anybody else's response to it is. When I do that, I'm ready to move forward again. So when I lose my way, I have complete compassion. This is self-acceptance. To be gentle with yourself is, I think, the fastest way to grow as a human being as well. Yeah. Because I'm here taking responsibility for myself in the world. When I'm clear, I show up with integrity. When I'm afraid, I don't. It actually comes down to that. When I'm afraid I'm going to lose something or not get what I want, it's the only two reasons I can find. I think it's Katie Byron who said that. People lie because they're only for two reasons. They're afraid they're going to lose what they have or not get what they want. Now, when you see the truth of that in yourself, you can have some self-compassion, and then you can understand other people's behavior and not take it personally. And I think once you have self-awareness about why you do what you do, you then have a greater awareness about what's driving other people's behavior, and you no longer can even force yourself to take it personally. The other thing that's happening around this topic is my mom, bless her soul, she's 81 and she's got some health problems. She lives a couple of hours away from me. But she's developed, talk about not taking things personally. I've been really, you bring up this topic and I go, wow, have I ever been dealing with this in my life? My mother hasn't been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, but several years ago, she decided that my older sister had somehow gotten some money, her hands on some money after my dad died, and that she was stealing from her. Now, I can tell you with 99.9%, this is an impossibility. My dad didn't leave my mom anything. He left her in a pretty tough situation 27, 28 years ago. She had enough money to basically cover his funeral, and that was it. His life insurance policy had lapsed. And she found these old shares that he'd bought in a mining company that years ago he invested in, and we since have done research, and that company never got into operation. It just it dissolved into nothingness, and that money just went away. She's decided that those shares were worth something, and my older sister got her hands on them and cashed them in, and it's worth millions. This is just okay. So this is the power of story that we can tell ourselves. Now it's spread not just to my older sister, but to all of us. So she's living in a reality where she feels that, she told me this on Easter, that she believes that they've got this money, and now it's because my other siblings are not going along with this story anymore. We've done the research. We're like, Mom, there aren't any shares. There's no company. They went bankrupt. It was dissolved decades ago. There isn't anything for her to have stolen. Now she shifted the story to, we're all getting paid off. Okay, this is a horrible thing. It's heartbreaking. So my mother was in tears telling me, saying, I can't believe you're doing this to me.
Mm.
Now, I know I'm not doing this to my mother. I know that my older sister, who is a really devout Christian, honor your mother, she wouldn't dream of doing this. The only thing she's guilty of is sometimes she sometimes over functions for people. Let me do that for you. Let me take over when, with the best of intentions. That's the only thing that I would say she might have done with my mom when my dad died. She certainly wouldn't steal from her. So you can imagine this story that my mother believes. It doesn't matter what we say. Now, might be an obvious thing not to take personally, but it's a great metaphor for me in
Yeah.
some ways. We create a story in our mind and then we treat people a certain way. When my story shifts and changes, the way I engage with the world around me shifts and changes.
Mm.
And that's been my experience. And so my mother is engaging with me, not based on who I really am, but based on who her story
There he is.
of me is in the moment. Now, there is
No judgment comes in.
so I know 100% not to take that
Mm.
personally. And I want to be clear. It's hard. In the times I did take it personally, I was devastated. For momentarily, and then, my thinking calmed down. I got clear. And of course, I'm not taking that personally.
Mm.
Now, I want to suggest that can be extrapolated to every single person in our life. It's just clear to see because this is so dramatic. But I just, it's like that's just another teaching for me about not taking other people's behavior personally. It's not all about me. It's all about them and how they see the world.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for me to navigate my own life when I'm not taking people's behavior personally. The other thing is about not taking what's happening. It's not about me. Like life is unfolding. There's a neutrality to that. There's a neutrality to the unfolding of life. And if I take it personally because it's not unfolding in the way I think it should unfold, I'm going to have a really hard time in this life. So there's this beautiful neutrality of the way that life is unfolding. And I can get upset about it because I've got a version of reality in my mind that I prefer, or I can align myself and trust that larger unfolding.
Mm.
And I just find that that's a really powerful place to be. It doesn't disempower me. It actually empowers me to be creative in my own response to life. So there's like a paradox there where you stop taking it all personally and you're actually personally empowered. You're empowered to respond and be more responsive in the moment to life.
And also, when you stop taking it personally, you are able to bypass what you think somebody is or what they're saying or what the story is. And you get underneath that radar where you start meeting somebody at a different level.
Beautiful.
And that could be with somebody we love, but even with somebody we don't know very well that we feel is quite critical, when you don't take it personally and you are allowing your energy to be open in a sense, you are able to come under that radar with what popped into my mind was, you go into a shop and the shopkeeper or the assistant is being very flippant or difficult or whatever. And I don't usually take that personally anymore. I used to, I'd like really good service, but now it's just about, I'm very curious about what's going on with them.
Yeah.
And when I don't fall into that story of what's going on, and I start dealing with them at a level where I'm quite authentic, I often find that I go under that radar and suddenly we start having a conversation. And that's the most important thing is seeing the benefit of that, of being able to still connect with somebody and whilst not taking it all personally.
I love it, Marion, because if I'm taking it personally, then I'm a victim, and I'm going to be defensive. And
And
that
you're
does
making a story up about
Right,
it yourself.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I have to make a story up to take it personally to begin with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's all about me
Mm.
and how I think you should be treating me, how you should be behaving. You know, that's all in our personal story. And it doesn't mean I like good service too. I love good customer service, but I don't need good customer service to be at peace and to
Mm.
be clear and to be a happy human being. And I love what you said, because when I don't have those requirements, I can then connect to that deeper essence of the person in front of me. You know, I'm not putting up a defensive, um, I'm not coming at them. And so that leaves us both available. Maybe, you know, so then maybe we'll be able to go on and have a more pleasant interaction or not. But I definitely won't be putting more fuel in the fire when I'm clear and I'm not taking it personally. You know, let's face it, my ego takes everything personally. It's all about me, obviously. You know?
Obviously. And that is true, because a lot of the clients that I see, and we talk about this, because they're having problems with lots of relationships because of this. When they start not taking it personally and they get under that radar and they start connecting with one of their parents or a sibling or their partner or their children, whoever it is, things start resolving. And
Yeah.
that's because it's not all about me anymore. It's just about the way things are, and we're human beings connecting at a level. So that's why I love this subject.
I love it too. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Marion, because when we don't shift into defensiveness, there is an opportunity for this deeper connection that already is, this oneness that really always exists, but our egos get in the way of it and obscure it, or our personal stories. So when I'm not living from that place and taking everything personally, I'm aware of that deeper connection. And then that deeper connection can be felt between us, even when the other person is caught up in
Yeah.
their story. And I just find that when you take care of your clarity and your peace in that, then, as you said, the relationships resolve themselves. You know, if I'm in a relationship with someone who's treating me really poorly, let's say, and I take care of my peace in it and my clarity, I'm going to be taking responsibility for my well-being, and I'm going to be making choices about what I expose myself to. But there's always going to be an opportunity for the dynamic to shift. If I'm aware of that oneness, if I'm aware of that connection, it doesn't mean it's going to. They may stay in their story, or they may stay in insecurity and fear and act out of that. And their behavior may be something that I choose not to expose myself to. That may be the choice that happens, but the relationship will resolve, as you say, in one way or the other. And if we're aware of our connection and don't move into that defensiveness and don't take their behavior personally, it still leaves us with the clarity not to put ourselves in harm's way if someone is in a place where they're harming themselves or us. But it also leaves the door open to their behavior shifting and changing, because miraculous things happen when we don't get defensive, but bring that sense of oneness into a relationship. You know, people start to drop their own egos. They start to drop their own defensiveness, because that connection and that oneness is the truth underneath, you know, the separate identities and the egos, the places where we are in disharmony with one another.
It's so important to say that, because people think that one, it's unachievable to not take anything personally, and two, that if you don't take it personally, what we're requiring, well, in my therapy, that I'm requiring them to stay within a dysfunctional relationship. And that is absolutely not. What not taking it personally allows you to do is to be in that position where you either do make a much healthier connection, or you see things so much more clearly and have that choice of actually, this is something that I want in my life or not.
Yes, absolutely. I
And
love it.
choice, you know,
Absolutely.
everything that we talk about, underlying it, all of that is that where we get to take something inside of ourselves, decide whether that fits in with the way that we want to live our life in the most healthiest way possible. And if it doesn't, we can make a choice to let it go. So, and isn't it, everything about life is about learning that, because I didn't have that when I was younger, and I don't think you did either. We didn't know that that's what life was about. It's about feeling it inside. Does it resonate? Is it right for us? And make the right choice and be brave
Absolutely.
enough to let things go.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It's we think that if we recognize the oneness in life, that we'll just put up with anything. But actually, when you see the way life works, you are engaging with life with more clarity and greater clarity. And so you're responding rather than reacting. So I can still respond to someone else's behavior, but the degree of clarity that I have, that it isn't personal, their behavior isn't really about me, it's about who they're showing up in the world in the moment as, and what they are thinking and believing. See,
Yeah.
we're all living out of what we're thinking and believing in the moment.
Yeah.
And if that's really dysfunctional, if this thought stream is really dysfunctional, my behavior is going to be really dysfunctional, regardless of who I'm interacting with. When you start to see that, you start to naturally take people's behavior less personally and take more responsibility for the kind of life you're creating for yourself and who you want to engage with and interact with. So very empowering and very conducive to starting to create the kind of partnerships and the kind of relationships where you can create what you want with someone, rather than try and make them be who you want them to be, or be on the receiving end of that. My partner now, we spent a lot of years trying to change each other. Once we stopped taking our behavior personally, we took responsibility for ourselves within the relationship. If we had an argument, we would go away, get clear, and we would come back and say, wow, this is what I understand about myself from what happened between us.
Yeah.
And then the two of us, so we would both, what a difference. Instead of, you did this, you did that, and it made me feel that. So you can see how transformative, not taking things personally is. It was like, whoa, you go away and there's this self-reflection. Where did that come from within me? And that doesn't mean that there might be some of his behavior that I'm no longer interested in experiencing. So, those two things happen simultaneously. And so again, you come back to being engaged, but very empowered within that engagement. And that can be extrapolated out into every area of life.
Yeah, it can.
Did you ever read the book, The Four Agreements? Don, what's his name?
I love it, love it, love it. I love it. And in fact, it's so weird that you brought that up, because there was a client maybe not last week, the week before. And obviously we got locked down in the UK, and he's been going walking and listening to stuff. And I said, oh, why don't you listen to the Four Agreements? And he sent me a message back and said that he absolutely loved it. So yeah, I do love it. I think it's great.
Yeah. So one of them, the reason it's coming to mind, I think, is that, he talked about not taking anything personally. We have this conditioning. He calls it different. It's been a long time, but that was the first book that I ever read that really touched on this subject and not taking other people personally.
Yeah.
That really started to introduce me to, it's like, what?
And also, and we need to finish soon, but I talk to people about what I do, sort of getting them over the bridge to being authentic. And on that bridge, there are lots of things that you need to understand and learn. And without a shadow of a doubt, on that bridge, one of them is not taking things personally. And because it's a huge personal growth, part of your personal growth, when you really understand that, when you really understand it, are able to live it. And gosh, sometimes I still fall flat in my face with that.
Yeah.
So, but that's being human, you know. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
isn't that a beautiful part of the experience, though, Marion, is that I no longer think I have to perform in a certain way. I live my life, and sometimes I fall flat on my face. And
Mm,
that's all a part of that just shows me where I'm really at in the moment.
yeah.
And that becomes a part of the learning and the growing. I mean, it's just, for
Yeah.
me, nothing is excluded.
Mm,
All of my experience teaches me there's nothing that can happen that isn't going to grow me.
mm.
Now,
Yes, that's true.
come on. I mean, I've let go of my personal story to some degree, not completely, but for the larger story of anything that happens to me, there's so much freedom in that. Anything that happens to me, I have this trust that nothing can happen that isn't going to teach me something valuable. And that's a bigger, that is trusting the larger picture of life. Like, there isn't anything that could possibly happen to me that won't evolve me and grow me
Yeah.
and teach me something valuable. Um, so
One of the most beautiful
love
things
that.
about personal growth, which I think that anybody listening to this would agree with, because anybody listening to this would have to be a personal developer, really, because to be interested in it, is that that you only personally grow through all the experiences that you have, whether they're amazing or they're very difficult. But there is a nugget of gold in every single one of them that is going to give you a clue about who you are in your best version of yourself and in the worst version of ourselves sometimes. So yeah, you know, learning and growing from those is very important. So thank you so much. Were you thinking about something then? Was I going to cut you off in the middle of thinking about
Yeah,
something profound?
Marion, we could just go on and on. There's just an infinite number of of ways to look at any particular subject, and I'm seeing the time, so I know I've gone on long enough for it. The other thing I was going to say, though, I was thinking, is that I was exposed to this model of how we create our experience, and it was I think it was Katie Byron. It doesn't matter, but it was here's the order of creation: think, feel, act, have. So the first part of that equation is the quality of thinking
Yeah.
that we have in any given moment is going to create our feeling response. We're going to put action behind that, and then voila, we see the evidence of what we've created by the life that we're living.
Mm,
So think, feel, act, have. So that's going on for every human being, not just me. Everyone is subject to the best thinking that they have in the moment in terms of coping with life or responding to life around them. So the more I see that in myself, the more I realize that that's what's going on for everyone.
yeah.
And so some compassion arises within me. I realize it's really not about me, it's about what they're thinking and feeling and believing in the moment.
Mm,
And so that's the bottom line. And the more I see that, the less personally, there isn't it a paradox though, Marion, is the less personally I take other people's behavior and the events at large. Like, why me? Why is this happening? Why is the COVID-19 happening during my lifetime, or whatever? So there's a neutrality to the unfolding of life. And yet, once we stop taking it personally, we can show up in a much more empowered way in our
very
very own
true.
personal experience of life. So
Yeah. And it is as simple as that, actually. The more that you see it, that
yeah,
everybody is living their own story, and the
yeah,
more that you let it go, the more your life changes for the better.
beautiful.
Great place to stop.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
So we're going to come up with a great subject for next week.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I should put my thinking cap on. I have a feeling it might be around how to love ourselves.
Ooh, I love it. That's juicy. That's been so important. It's so important in my life. It's just been.
It is.
Key.
And this little one knows how to love herself.
Yeah, it's just all about her. I mean, really.
Me.